is that even happening right now? That is crazy. This is the brand new Sony ZV-E1. It's a 4K vlogging camera that Sony just announced yesterday, and it's available for pre-order at a pretty high price point of $2,200 US. That is not cheap. And so especially when you compare it to the rest of the cameras in the Sony ZV line, this is the fourth camera that's joining that lineup, and it's by far the most expensive. And so in this video, I'll tell you a bit more about this camera with lots of sample footage. I'm actually filming with it right now. And there are 7 things in particular that make this camera stand out from the rest of the crowd. By the way, I'm also here at Sony's Camera Camp, which is such a cool experience. I actually have you guys to thank for being here. I would never be here if not for everyone watching my videos and commenting and engaging with it. So thank you for supporting the channel and watching the video. I also have the Sony ZV-E1 on loan. I don't get to keep it, but I did get to play with it for the next couple of days to test it out and tell you more about it. So the Sony ZV-E1 is capable of shooting at up to 4K 60 frames per second regular video, or you can even do 4K 120 frames per second or 1080p up to 240 frames per second. One of the only Sony cameras that can do that is the Sony a7S III. And so in a lot of ways, the Sony ZV-E1 is kind of like a more consumer-friendly version of the a7S III. And even though the ZV-E1 can shoot 12 megapixel still photos, it is definitely a video-centric camera aimed at vloggers and content creators. The first key feature about the ZV-E1 is that it has next generation in-body image stabilization. It has 5-axis IBIS built into the camera, and when the maximum amount of stabilization is applied, it's called dynamic active mode, and it is 30% more effective than regular active mode. There is a slight crop that's applied, so just be aware of that. So it really helps for doing any kind of handheld filming or movement while holding this camera, which you guys might know is my preferred way of filming with cameras. I do have gimbals, but a large majority of the time whenever I'm out vlogging or shooting travel videos, I like to do it handheld. So I really appreciate that the IBIS has really been improved on the ZV-E1. The second key feature is called AI-based auto framing. This is an extremely cool feature. It uses AI-based subject recognition within the camera to crop into the shot and keep the subject in a prominent position. So let me demonstrate how that works. So if I'm all the way back here, the camera is going to zoom in on me and make sure that I'm in the center of the frame at all times, because that's what I've specified in the settings. That was really cool, huh? So this is something that I've seen on Insta360 cameras. I think the Insta360 Link, the webcam, can do this, but it's not something that I've ever seen on a compact camera like a mirrorless camera before. I think Sony is one of the first ones, if not the first, to incorporate technology like this. But it is so cool, and it really is done best if the camera is on a tripod, and so it just looks like you've got a cameraman that's following you around and operating the zoom and moving the camera with you, when in reality the camera is totally stable. And so it's just one of the many ways that Sony is making their new vlogging cameras more accessible for one-person vlogging teams, such as myself. Like, I'm just in my hotel room right now talking to a camera and a tripod. And so a lot of us are filming our content these days. And so it's features like this that help us get more dynamic shots without having to have a camera operator. The next cool feature is dedicated AI tracking. So Sony cameras are already known for their really awesome and accurate autofocus, and the ZV-E1 has even better autofocus than before, because now it's able to recognize a wider variety of subjects. So this camera will recognize not only humans and animals and birds, but also insects, cars, trains, and airplanes. This next feature addresses Sony colors, which some people have been very critical about in the past, saying that Sony colors really aren't that great. But you know, this recent generation of Sony cameras has made some big improvement in the colors. And so the ZV-E1 actually allows you to shoot in S-Cinetone, and you can also shoot in various log profiles and even upload your own LUTs. If that didn't make any sense to you, then the feature that is a little bit more applicable is called Cinematic Vlog Setting. So it's just a way for you to control the contrast, saturation, and the color tones in your image in camera. The next cool feature about the ZV-E1 addresses sound, and so the ZV-E1 does have a built-in capsule microphone on top of the camera, and it also comes with a optional furry windscreen that you can put on top of it. And so it's actually really cute. It looks like a little hairdo on the camera, but it's also very functional. It does a really great job of blocking out any wind. And you can actually set what direction that you want the microphone to prioritize. It can be in all direction, which is what we're shooting in right now. Really handy if I want to be behind the camera and show you the view, or we can set it in front-facing priority, which is going to prioritize the front part of the camera so that if I'm on the other side of it, any noise over here won't be picked up so much. Or it can be a rear-facing sensitivity, which is ideal if you're going to be behind the camera walking and narrating. Now, even though the ZV-E1 does have a really great built-in microphone, you might notice that I am shooting with an external microphone right now. This is the Rode Wireless Me, which I'll talk about in a future video, but I'm using it because it still has an external microphone jack to plug in your own microphone if you choose. And in this case, I am filming in a pretty big room with a lot of echo. And so in those cases, you can use your own external microphone if you choose, because there is a hot shoe mount on top of the camera as well. And now for the last key feature I want to mention about the ZV-E1, and that is called framing stabilizer. So it works pretty similarly to auto framing, except for auto framing, that's best done if the camera is planted. And for framing stabilizer, you want to enable this if you do have a camera operator, or if you're controlling the camera and following a subject, because as you do that, framing stabilizer will help you keep the subject in the center of the frame as you're moving with it, which if you've ever done that, then you know that it's pretty tricky to do. So any kind of assistance you can have to do that is definitely nice to have. This camera also performs extremely well in low lighting, which is just mind-blowing. So if you want a really good vlogging camera that can basically shoot in the dark, then the ZV-E1 is definitely one to consider. All right, so it's after dinner on day 2 of camera camp, and so the sun set maybe about half an hour ago, and so we're doing a little low light test with the Sony ZV-E1 and the Sony 20mm f1.8, trying to see what it looks like in low light and also what it sounds like. But as I mentioned earlier, there is a really high price point of $2,200 US for the camera body alone. You actually have to buy a lens to go along with it. So I think you can get the kit lens for an extra couple $100. If you plan to hold the camera out, I don't think that's quite wide enough. So in my opinion, you want something like the 20mm f1.8, which is the lens that I'm shooting with right now, or maybe even the 16 to 35mm f4, the power zoom version. That would also be a pretty ideal vlogging lens for this camera. But when you add up the cost of the camera plus the lens and then an SD card, maybe an external battery, then that's really driving the price up. So it's going to be closer to the $3,000 mark when you incorporate all of those accessories that you have to buy with the camera. So it's a really high price point. I'm not sure how many of you out there can actually afford it, but if it is in your budget, then I do think that this camera is going to be well worth it if you plan to make video-centric content out there. But if it seems too expensive for you, then don't worry, there are lots of other cameras out there that are suitable for vlogging. There are more cameras in the Sony ZV line, there are action cameras, there are phones, there are cameras that I will continue to talk about here on this channel. So stay tuned if you want to hear more reviews about vlogging cameras and vlogging accessories. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.